Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Paul Nuttall, good morning to you. Have you lost?
I can't hear a thing.
Oh, Paul Nuttall, can you hear me? Paul Nuttall, can you hear me?
No. Andrew, it's really muffled.
All right, Paul, let me see if I can speak clearly and you can hear me. Have you lost the by-election?
Okay. Well, it looks as if Labour have held this seat. It also looks as though we've also increased our vote share. It looks as if we've halved their majority. So, on the whole, it isn't a bad night for UKIP. Equally, it isn't a great night for the Labour Party because their majority would have been halved.
I understand you've said to another channel that Labour, you've accused Labour of, quote, engaging in dangerous identity politics in Oldham West. What did you mean by that?
Well, because the Labour Party have focused their campaign on one particular part of the community, and they've ensured that they've got this block vote. I must also say that I've never seen anything like this in my life in terms of postal voting. The postal vote went up by 15% on the day, and I must congratulate the Labour Party for running a very successful postal vote election. But I think it does throw up in the air the whole question of democracy, because, you know, why do we bother having polling days? This election was probably over a week before the election took place, and I think we should go back to a system whereby people have to sign up for postal votes and give a good reason. Either you're infirm, you work on the rigs, you're in the armed forces. What we shouldn't have is postal vote on demand, because I think it's the front of democracy.
But what's wrong with getting people to vote by post? If that's the law at the moment, what's wrong with Labour trying to organise its postal vote? All the parties try to organise their postal vote as well as get the vote out on the day, don't they?
Yeah, but look, we've had problems in Tower Hamlets with this. We've had problems in Birmingham. I can only foresee more problems to come, particularly in these northern seats in years to come. And I just think that now is the time to say enough is enough, and let's go back to the old system where the vote is decided actually on election day and not a week before the election takes place.
But let me just be clear, you are not accusing anybody of any wrongdoing here?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that the system is broken and that the system is wrong and that the system is unfair. And of course, it gives a great advantage to the incumbents and those who run the council, because they know where their voters are. And as I say, I must congratulate the Labour Party for ensuring that the postal vote went up by 15% in a day. I've never seen anything like it in my life in politics. There are boxes coming out there, postal votes, whereby Labour are getting 99% of the vote.
So interesting that you've said that twice now in our short interview, and you've said it with a smile on your face. Is there a hidden meaning? Is there a second meaning to what you're trying to tell us this morning?
Sorry, I didn't catch that one, Andrew.
You've emphasised twice the size of the Labour postal vote and how it's gone so much Labour's way. You've said it with a smile in your face as you congratulate them. What's the real meaning you're trying to give us here?
Well, you know, I'm saying it with sarcasm. I think the system is broken. I think it's wrong. I think it's undemocratic. I think that we should just simply go back to the old system whereby the election is decided on the election day, and it isn't decided a week before when there's a whole lot of campaigning to come and people have already voted. I think it's wrong, and I think, you know, if the Conservative government had anything about them, they would instigate some sort of investigation into this system, and I would suggest by the end of that investigation they would do away with it altogether, and we will go back to a system which is befitting of a great democratic country.
And on the matter of identity politics, I take it you're referring to the British Asian vote in the constituency. About 25% vote strongly Labour, and it would seem has come out for Labour this time. I mean, all parties try to maximise their support in particular communities. What's wrong with what Labour's done?
Well, look, I mean, if you're going to focus your campaign on one particular part of the community, I think you will end up in hock to that community, particularly if your MP has been elected off the back of votes, postal votes, particularly from within that community. And I think it's wrong, and I think it's an affront to democracy. And as I say, I'm not criticising the people here, Andrew. I'm criticising the process of postal voting on demand. It was brought in by Tony Blair to push up the turnout in elections. Actually, what it's done, and as you've seen in Tower Hamlets and Birmingham, is it's given an open goal to those who want to cheat the system.
Right, that's on the postal votes. I just find I was asking on the identity politics. It's surely not an affront to democracy that British Asians in the constituency have voted in large numbers for a local candidate, not a British Asian himself, but a well-known local candidate with a long council record. That's not an affront to democracy, is it?
No, the affront to democracy, Andrew, is that huge numbers of people in this constituency have gone out and voted by post, and a big number have voted a week before over a week in some cases before the election has taken place, and there is a lot of time a lot of campaigning time has been lost as a result, and I believe that is grossly unfair. And a big chunk of that vote within the Asian community has come from postal voting, and I don't think that is actually fair to smaller parties like ourselves, to insurgent parties, because it plays right into the hands of those who are the incumbents and those who run the council.
All right, Paul Nuttall, thanks for joining us live from Oldham there, where the count seems to have come to an end. We expect to get the result very shortly, and Paul Nuttall, they're already conceding that UKIP have not managed to take this seat from Labour, though they may well have reduced the size of Labour as a majority. John Ashworth, just what's your response to Paul Nuttall's remarks on postal votes?
I'm deeply offended. Deeply offended. I represent Leicester, a hugely diverse city. I'm proud of the diversity of Leicester. I think people know what he was trying to suggest there. I'm not going to put my, I think people know what he was trying to get to.
That's what I was trying to get him to spell it out.
Yeah, he wouldn't spell it out.
Would you like to spell it out?
He wouldn't spell it out because he knows the reaction he would have got if he'd spelled it out. But we know what he was driving at. And I think for him to be saying, oh, we've got an issue here like it's gone on in Tower Hamlets, or an issue that's gone on in Birmingham, I think he's pretty shoddy. And if UKIP have lost, he shouldn't be on there whinging and suggesting it's something untoward has gone on.
Is it your view that he's implying that in somehow there's been some, what word shall I use, fiddling of the postal votes?
Well,
is that what you think is being implied?
I think he's trying to throw around some pretty, make some pretty shoddy suggestions when actually, if UKIP haven't won here, it's not because there's some big postal vote fiddle that has gone on. It's because people haven't voted UKIP because they don't agree with UKIP's policies and they don't think the UKIP candidate is the right man to represent them.
And is that not the long and the short of it, Diana?
No, I don't think it is. So we've had two broadsheets. First one, a political reporter on the 27th of November, another one today. Both of them made the point that they were out, and they're not UKIP members, let's be absolutely clear on that. They were out, they were talking to individuals who were intending to vote, and I'll paraphrase one of the remarks. It was along the lines of, do you know who you're going to be voting for? I haven't been told yet, was one of the answers. I think
that's a kind of hearsay anecdote, though, isn't it?
Well, you could say that, but then the other aspect that I understand has happened today with the postal vote, the particular community that we're talking about, and I'm not denigrating that community in any way, but they have typically had a low turnout. The point that Paul was making is that this has gone up, I don't know whether it's extortionately, I don't know what degree of proportion, but it sounds like at least a doubling. There is therefore...
Well, we don't know that. We know the overall turnout. We don't yet know the turnout in the British Asian community there. What he was talking about was that there were more postal votes than usual.
Well, sorry, let me make myself a little bit even more clearer then.
Yeah.
An issue then in terms of not only the proportion of turnout in that particular part of the constituency, but also the proportion and a significant increase in the proportion of postal votes from that community as well.
I want to show you a leaflet that did the rounds during the campaign. Here it is, Labour News. Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, uncontrolled mass immigration, axing our armed forces, abolishing the monarchy, hand over the Falklands to Argentina. The only problem is that isn't from Labour News. There's no party on it at all. but the name at the bottom is the UKIP agent. Is that proper politics?
It's exactly, if you like, what we've learned from some of our political opponents. We were putting out there messages on that leaflet which reflected exactly what we were getting back from constituents.
Yeah, but you're implying that's from some organisation within the Labour Party.
No, what we're saying,
what does Labour News mean?
What we're saying there is a whole series of messages, Andrew, which if you were to ask any individual out there, what do they associate with the Labour Party, it would be uncontrolled mass immigration. Under Tony Blair, that started the rot that we've got in terms of that. Axing our armed forces. Look at the Strategic Defence Review that they undertook during their time in government.
Oh, it's nothing like the cuts that the current government has done on its Strategic Defence Review.
I appreciate the point you're making there.
All these points may or may not be fine. But if you think they're right, why don't you put your UKIP logo on them rather than the Labour logo?
And this goes back to the point that we've just discussed. We are complying with electoral law because the imprint at the bottom of the leaflet tells us tells the voter. I'm sorry, Andrew, you know, I'm only highlighting exactly what has been said.
It's a sleight of hand.
You don't. I don't agree with that.
I thought you were going to say you don't disagree with it because it so obviously is. The Labour News is an enormous type. And at the bottom, if you read the small print, which no one ever does, you find out that it's actually, and it doesn't even say UKIP, I don't think, does it?
Andrew, if you look...
It just gives you a name, you'd have to know it was the UKIP agent.
Andrew, if you were to flip the other side of that leaflet, you would then see all of the UKIP messages. What we did with that leaflet was we had on one side, and this is absolutely what every candidate does, you sell your own messages, you put your own campaign messages across, and on the other side you try and undermine the key messages that your opponent's making.
Do you think Jeremy Corbyn was a factor in this election?
Well, can I just say on that leaflet, that's classic dirty tricks, isn't it? He did a very spirited defence of it, but it's dirty tricks, that sort of leaflet, isn't it? You're trying to con the electorate into thinking that they've got a leaflet from the Labour Party with all these kind of outlandish claims about what the Labour Party is going to do, but it's not true, is it?
All right.
You know.
Let's go to our newsroom. We're joined by the award-winning John Curtis, Professor of Politics at Glasgow's other university, the University of Strathclyde. If the UKIP comes a decent second, I'm not quite sure what I mean by decent, but it becomes a decent second in terms of share of the vote. Can they take much comfort from that, or have they just come second for the second time?
Well, I think the truth is this is a constituency where we know at least a section of the electorate are willing to vote for a far-right candidate, particularly amongst the more white, working-class, less well-off parts of the constituency. This was a constituency back in 2001 where Nick Griffin, the former leader of the BNP, got 16% of the vote, and that time was regarded as something as shot.
Meanwhile, as that's been going on there, we have had a tweet from Nigel Farage, the leader of UKIP, who says evidence from an impeccable source that today's postal vote was bent. Evidence from an impeccable source, says the UKIP leader, that today's postal voting was bent. We have no idea, of course, what that actually means in practice, but no doubt that will have to be substantiated as the time goes on. But of course, we held from his deputy, Paul Nuttall, who was always making a big issue of the postal vote.
Nigel Farage has changed his line on that. Hang on, this is very important breaking news. He now says that a dog ate all his votes.
Yeah, good, because that's more plausible than what he said about 10 to 8 this morning.
Let's put the figures up onto the screen so we can all see the result of this by-election. So there are the actual votes themselves. 17,322 gives Labour a 62.2% share of the vote. It's an overwhelming victory. No one came close, even UKIP, which had hopes of coming a strong second. I would suggest, Diane James, that is not a strong second at all. You're 11,000 votes behind, a huge share of the vote. It's a pretty poor result given your expectations.
It's not a pretty poor result in terms of expectations. It's another very good second. We've put our...
a very good second?
You've made... Look, can I just make some points.
You got
Andrew.
23% of the vote. The winner got 62% of the vote.
I don't know what Nigel means by his tweet in terms of an issue over the postal vote.
No, I understand. None of us do yet.
But if we factor in the postal vote issue, let's just call it an issue at this stage, that may well account for the fact that Labour has seen theirs go up by the amount it has. Was it 7%, something like that? UKIP's still taken their vote
just
share
while you're talking,
up.
there are the shares of the vote going through. We can see them now up on the screen. Labour on 62%, overwhelming victory there tonight. UKIP second, but only on 23. We'll come to the Conservatives and Lib Dems later on 9 and 4. Other parties on 1%. I'm sorry, Diane James, I interrupted you.
I'd love to have seen.
Not a great result when you see that chart there. That's not a good second. It's a second, but it's not a good second.
It's a second, and I've got no problem with a second on the basis that we've still increased our vote compared to the major general election. And look at what we've done to the Conservative vote, which should have been the challenger here if some of the pundits had been believed.
Really? I can't remember any pundit said the Conservatives would be the challenger.
Well, I'm talking about George Osborne, the powerhouse.
He's not a pundit, he's the Chancellor.
Trying to say...
Maybe he has clearly, if that's what he said, he hasn't got a future as a pundit either.
The Conservatives tried to make the point that they were going to take Labour on in these cases.
Share of the vote. So the Labour vote in this by-election went up 7%, compared 7 percentage points. It's really the proper way to put it, compared with the general election in May. UKIP went up just under, we've rounded it up to 3 there. It's about 2.7, I think. Nigel Farage is still tweeting, even though it's now 1:19 in the morning. He's now saying, as a veteran of over 30 by-elections, I've never seen such a perverse result. Serious questions need to be asked. Well, Mr. Farage, if you've got any information would allow us to ask serious questions, we'd be delighted to do so. But so far we haven't. That may well be a developing story overnight and into the morning.
Oh, hang on. I've got some more breaking news on Mr. Farage's reasons why they did so badly. Apparently, a big boy did it and ran away.
And whereas we're agreeing that this wasn't any kind of recovery for the Lib Dems, in reality, it's not much of a recovery for UKIP either. You're still in the doldrums.
I don't think we're in the doldrums. I'd accept it we were in the doldrums if our vote had gone down. It's gone up, Andrew. I'm more than happy with the fact that we've gone up, even if it's only 2 or 3%, as your chart showed. That to us, that's not a party in the doldrums. That's a party that's still going places. And we had volunteers up there campaigning. We weren't bussing people in like the Labour Party were doing. And, you might want to denigrate our leaflets. Some of the stuff that you put out as well, and some of the comments made today, pretty appalling stuff. So, regretfully, politics is a dirty game, and it's not, it's what's starting to turn people off. And, that aspect in terms of elections has not gone away.
In the end, it's difficult for UKIP to win unless it's an overwhelmingly white constituency. That's the blunt truth of it, isn't it? In the Haywood one, the ethnic vote was only 5%. In this constituency, it's between 25 and 30%, largely Pakistani, Bangladeshi in origin. If they come out to vote, you don't do too well. You are quite specific in the appeal that you're making.
I'm not going to try and argue against you on that, Andrew. We've admitted over and over again that there are certain constituencies, certain parts of the population where we don't appeal to them politically. Having said that, even in the newspaper coverage in the last couple of weeks, there were instances cited where if you want to talk about somebody from the Muslim background, they were saying they were going to vote for us. So it's a slow process. We're not expecting to suddenly take John's seat here in Leicester South.
Well, that's probably realistic.
That is realistic.
UKIP, who'd talked of being in with the chance to win the seat, came a long way behind in second place. Well, we're joined by the leader of UKIP now, Nigel Farage. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And what is your reaction to this result?
Well, I've been involved in 30 by-elections, and no result has shocked me quite as much as this one. A safe Labour seat, which Labour won, OK, no particular surprise there. But some very odd things happened yesterday. I mean, there was a 15% increase in the number of postal votes yesterday, and stories of practices that shouldn't really be happening in a modern democracy.
What do you mean?
I mean, reports of people turning up at polling stations with bundles of postal votes, being delivered on behalf of other people. What I'm basically saying is some of the things we've seen before in Birmingham, some of the things we've seen before in Tower Hamlets, I have reason to believe were happening in Oldham yesterday. Now, I'm not saying this would have changed the result, but I am saying that what we got was a very perverse result. And I've said it before, but I honestly think the postal voting system yesterday should, 25% of the vote should not have been made up by postal votes yesterday.
You tweeted that it was bent. We should say, though, that I think the postal voting was about 7,000. Labour's majority was more than 10,000.
Yeah, no, the fact that Labour won the seat, it's a safe Labour seat. The fact that Labour won the seat, I'm not questioning that. What I'm saying is, for the number of postal votes to have increased by 15% on one day, with plenty of evidence that people were turning up with bundles of votes, is something. And frankly,
well, let's strip out, because given what we know on the figures, do you accept that it was effectively a vote of confidence in Jeremy Corbyn? This was the first chance for the public to vote on the new leader, and they said yes.
No, not really. I very much take the view that it was a safe Labour seat. We would have seen a massively reduced majority, but what we saw happening through the postal votes was worrying in terms of how elections work, and perhaps worrying in the sense of quite where we go with some of our communities. I mean, there was a very interesting report in The Guardian last Saturday where their northern correspondent said she knocked on doors in a street where virtually no one spoke English. They didn't know who Jeremy Corbyn even was, but they were going to vote Labour. So there are some really quite sort of big, ethnic changes now in the way people are voting.
But what difference would that make? I mean, those people could just as easily vote for you.
They can't speak English. They've never heard of UKIP or the Conservative Party. They haven't even heard of Jeremy Corbyn.
But surely, I'm sorry, what I don't understand is why your argument doesn't apply to UKIP just as it does to Labour.
Because they have control of the local council, they have control of council housing, they have control of social services, and they have deep and very strong links with the mosques and other churches. And I'm commenting on the state of modern Britain post-mass immigration. It means effectively that in some of these seats, where, as I say, people don't speak English, but they're signed up to postal votes, effectively the electoral process is now dead.
Are you going to file a formal complaint against the way the election was run?
Well, we will file a formal complaint against the abuses that our people saw yesterday. But I'm making a point that one of the boxes that we looked at yesterday was 99% in favour of Labour, and that doesn't seem to be consistent with modern liberal democracy.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, hang on, I've got more breaking news about UKIP. Mr Farage has climbed down from his claim that the voting system was bent and has instead said that rather than filing an official complaint, he's going to squeam until he's sick, it says here.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. So you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir. The Bitterest is mine to take. If I took it for 100 years, I couldn't feel anymore there. The Bitterest is mine to take. If I took it for